I was folding laundry in our bedroom when Leslie walked in and said the words that would shatter 17 years of marriage. "I think we should open our relationship." "If you can't agree to this, Lillian, maybe we need to talk about separating." Just like that. No warning. No gentle lead-in. Just an ultimatum delivered while I held his favorite sweater in my trembling hands. I thought saying yes would save us. I didn't know it would destroy everything he was trying to protect. "My name is Lillian Clark. I'm 45 years old, and until 2 years ago, I thought I knew my husband. If you already feel that twist in your stomach, do me a favor right now while it's hitting you. Drop your name in the comments, tell me where in the world you're watching from, and what time it is there for you." I read every single one. And I love knowing this story is landing in bedrooms and kitchens and quiet corners all across the planet at 2 a.m. or 2 p.m., wherever you are. And please, hit that like button so more people find this one. Smash subscribe and turn on the notification bell. These stories only keep coming because of you. Thank you for being here with me. Now let's keep going. Leslie and I had been together for 17 years, not perfect years, but comfortable ones. We had our routines. Sunday mornings, he'd make pancakes while I read the newspaper. Friday nights were movie nights on the couch with popcorn and wine. We'd hold hands during walks around the neighborhood, the same loop we'd done 1,000 times. Small rituals that felt like love, or at least like safety. Looking back now, I realize I'd been ignoring the cracks for years. The way conversations became shorter, how he'd scroll through his phone during dinner, barely hearing me. The distance in his eyes when I'd try to kiss him goodnight. I told myself it was normal that all marriages went through phases, that couples grew comfortable, and that was okay. But that afternoon in our bedroom, with piles of clean clothes surrounding me like evidence of a life I thought we were building together, everything changed. "An open marriage?" I remember whispering, my voice barely audible over the sound of my heart breaking. He wouldn't look at me directly. He stared at the wall behind my shoulder, hands in his pockets, speaking in that careful, measured tone people use when they've rehearsed something. "We've been together a long time, Lil. We're getting older. I just think we should experience life more fully. It doesn't mean I don't love you. This could actually help us, bring excitement back. Help us." As if our marriage were a patient on life support and this was the treatment. I asked him if there was someone else. He said no, not really, just possibilities. Opportunities he didn't want to miss. He was 55 and feeling his age, he said. Didn't I understand? I understood that I was being given a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Stay and accept his terms, or lose him entirely. I begged for more time to think. He gave me 2 days. I spent those 48 hours in agony. I called in sick to work and stayed in bed, crying until my eyes swelled shut. I kept running through our history, searching for the moment I'd failed him. Was I not interesting enough? Not pretty enough anymore? Had I let myself go? I looked in the mirror and saw a middle-aged woman with gray roots showing and tired eyes, someone who'd spent years caring for a husband and a home and had somehow become invisible in the process. My sister Mia came over on the second day and found me still in my pajamas, surrounded by tissues. When I told her what Leslie had said, she grabbed my shoulders and looked me dead in the eyes. "Lillian, this is emotional blackmail. You know that, right?" But I wasn't ready to hear it. All I could think was that I'd been with this man for 17 years. He was my whole adult life. Who was I without him? What would I do? Where would I go? How would I survive starting over at 45? So when Leslie came home that evening and asked for my answer, I whispered the word that would change everything. Yes. I said yes because I was terrified of losing him. I said yes because I thought love meant sacrifice. I said yes because I believed that agreeing to his terms was better than being alone. I didn't know I was already alone. I didn't know that saying yes would be the beginning of losing myself, and that somehow, impossibly, it would also be the beginning of finding myself again. The first night Leslie went out, he acted like he was just going to grab drinks with colleagues. "Don't wait up," he said, kissing my forehead the way he always had. Like nothing had changed. Like we were still the couple who held hands on walks. I sat on the couch until midnight, then 1 a.m. Then 2. I kept the TV on for noise, but I wasn't watching it. I was listening for his car in the driveway, for the turn of his key in the lock. When he finally came home at 3:15, smelling of perfume that wasn't mine, he was humming. Humming. He went straight to the shower and then to bed, falling asleep within minutes while I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering whose perfume that was and what I'd agreed to. It became a pattern. Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, sometimes Fridays too. He'd dress nicer than he had in years, check his reflection twice, and leave with a spring in his step I hadn't seen since our early dating days. Meanwhile, I'd sit in our empty house, scrolling through my phone, refreshing social media feeds I didn't care about, anything to distract myself from the silence. I stopped cooking elaborate dinners. What was the point? I'd eat cereal standing at the counter, then wander through rooms that suddenly felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that now felt like lies. The worst part wasn't his absence. It was his presence when he returned. He'd come home energized, talkative, telling me about restaurants I'd never been to, jokes I hadn't heard, conversations with people whose names he'd casually drop like I should know them. He was happy, lighter, and I was disappearing. I started avoiding mirrors. I couldn't stand seeing myself this woman who'd agreed to become optional in her own marriage. The shame was suffocating. I'd wake up at 4 a.m., with my heart racing, questions spiraling through my mind. Was I enough? Had I ever been enough? What was wrong with me that my own husband needed to look elsewhere? I told no one. Not my coworkers, who asked why I looked tired. Not my friends, who stopped calling because I'd canceled plans too many times. I wrapped myself in silence and pretended everything was fine. But Mia knew better. She showed up unannounced 3 months in, took one look at me, unwashed hair, sweatpants at 2 p.m., empty eyes, and said, "Lillian, what is happening to you?" And I broke. Mia didn't lecture me. She didn't tell me to leave him or call me stupid for staying. She just held me while I cried on her shoulder for what felt like hours, then said something I'll never forget. "If he gets to live his life, so do you." I started small. Mia dragged me to her book club the following week, a group of women I'd met briefly at various family gatherings but never really knew. I almost canceled 3 times, convinced they wouldn't want me there, that I had nothing interesting to say. But Mia wouldn't let me back out. That first evening, sitting in Caroline's living room with wine and cheese and laughter, something shifted. We talked about the book for maybe 20 minutes, then spent 3 hours talking about everything else: careers, travels, regrets, dreams we'd abandoned, fears we'd never voiced. When Sarah mentioned her own divorce 5 years earlier, she looked at me with knowing eyes and said, "You're allowed to take up space, Lillian. You know that, right?" I didn't know that. I'd forgotten. Caroline invited me to an art gallery opening the next month. "It's just a small local thing," she said, "but the artist is fantastic, and there's free wine." I went, expecting to feel awkward and out of place. Instead, I spent 2 hours discussing color theory with a retired teacher named David, who made me laugh so hard I snorted. He didn't flirt. He didn't want anything from me. He just saw me, listened when I spoke, asked follow-up questions like my thoughts actually mattered. The invitations kept coming: dinner with book club friends, a pottery class Mia found, community theater auditions. Sarah convinced me to attend. I didn't get a part, but I met 3 women in the waiting room who invited me for coffee afterward. We talked for hours about nothing and everything, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time Leslie and I had talked like that. These people didn't know the diminished version of me I'd become. They met someone who was slowly remembering how to laugh, how to have opinions, how to exist without apologizing for taking up oxygen. They appreciated my dry humor, asked about my work as a librarian with genuine interest, valued my insights during conversations. I started looking forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays not because Leslie was going out, but because I was. For the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible anymore. Around month 5, I noticed Leslie was home more often. At first, I thought maybe he was sick or work had gotten busier. But then I realized his Tuesday and Thursday nights, the ones that used to be sacred, were suddenly spent on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a frown etched deep between his eyebrows. "Not going out tonight?" I asked one Thursday, halfway out the door to meet Caroline and Sarah for dinner. He looked up, surprised, like he'd forgotten I had places to be now. Nah, didn't feel like it. But it wasn't just one night. It became a pattern. The man who'd been so energized, so alive just months before, started looking tired, deflated. The humming stopped. The spring in his step disappeared. And the complaints started. "Everyone is so exhausting," he said one evening while we ate separate dinners, him with leftover pizza, me with a salad before heading to pottery class. "People want you to text constantly. They expect you to remember every little detail about their lives. When did everything become so much work?" I didn't respond. I just chewed my salad and checked my watch. Another night. "Women my age are all looking for something serious. And the younger ones," he laughed bitterly, "they're not interested in someone my age unless I'm some kind of sugar daddy. It's all so transactional. Nobody is just fun anymore." I found it darkly amusing that he was discovering what I'd known all along. Real connection requires effort, emotional investment, the very things he'd stopped giving our marriage years ago. What really changed, though, was his reaction to my life. "You're never home," he said one Saturday when I came back from a community theater rehearsal. I joined the crew after making friends during auditions. "You wanted an open marriage," I reminded him quietly. "I didn't think you'd actually." He trailed off, then shook his head. "Who are all these people you're spending time with?" "Friends." "What kind of friends?" The question hung in the air, loaded with an accusation I didn't owe him an answer to. But I saw it in his eyes, the jealousy, the resentment, the growing realization that the arrangement he'd demanded wasn't playing out the way he'd imagined. He'd expected me to wait at home, lonely and grateful, for whatever scraps of attention he offered between his adventures. He'd never considered that I might build a life that didn't revolve around him. The shift was palpable. He started suggesting we have dinner together, movie nights like we used to. "Remember when we'd walk around the neighborhood? Maybe we could do that again?" I'd agree sometimes, out of habit more than desire. But the conversations felt hollow, like we were two actors reading lines we'd forgotten how to deliver. One evening, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch in silence, he turned to me with eyes that looked almost desperate. "Lillian," he said softly, "do you still enjoy spending time with me?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came out, because I didn't know, or worse, I did know, and the truth would hurt too much to say aloud. I started noticing it in small moments, how my shoulders would relax when I walked into Caroline's house, but tense the moment I pulled into my own driveway. How I could talk for hours with my book club friends without checking the time, but 20 minutes of conversation with Leslie felt like wading through mud. My therapist, yes, I'd started seeing one. Something Mia had insisted on, called it finding your center again. I called it remembering who I used to be before I made myself smaller to fit into someone else's shrinking world. Meanwhile, Leslie was trying. God, he was trying so hard. He started making pancakes on Sunday mornings again. the way he used to. He'd bring me coffee in bed with that hopeful smile, like the gesture could erase 2 years of emotional abandonment. "Just like old times," he'd say. But it wasn't like old times. Old times, I would have been grateful, touched, wrapped up in the sweetness of the ritual. Now I just felt tired. He suggested movie nights. "Remember how we used to do Fridays? Let's start that again. I'll even let you pick the movie. Let me pick." As if my preferences were a generous concession rather than a basic courtesy. We'd sit on the couch, his arm draped around my shoulders in a possessiveness that felt more like desperation than affection. I'd watch the screen and feel nothing, not anger, not love, just a vast emptiness where feelings used to live. The morning conversations were worse. He'd linger over breakfast, asking about my day, my friends, my pottery class. "Tell me about that piece you're working on," he'd say, leaning forward with exaggerated interest. "The one you mentioned last week." I'd look at him and see a stranger wearing my husband's face. This man who suddenly cared, who wanted to know the details of my life. Where was he 2 years ago? 6 months ago? Where was this attention when I was drowning in loneliness, when I would have given anything for him to ask me about my day? He even suggested we take walks around the neighborhood again. We tried it once. He held my hand the way he used to, squeezed it at the corner where we always turned left. But I felt like I was holding hands with a ghost, a memory of someone who used to make me feel safe, cherished, seen. "I miss this," he said, his voice thick with nostalgia. "I miss us." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something that made my chest ache. I didn't miss us. I missed who we used to be, years before the open marriage, before the distance, before he'd turned our relationship into something negotiable. I missed the man who'd been my partner, not this one trying desperately to rewind time because his experiment had failed. That night, lying in bed beside him, listening to his breathing slow into sleep, I stared at the ceiling and asked myself a question I'd been avoiding for weeks. When did I stop loving him? The confrontation happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. I'd canceled plans with Sarah to stay home because Leslie had actually asked if we could spend the evening together. He'd seemed anxious all week, and part of me knew something was coming. We sat at the kitchen table with tea, neither of us was drinking. The rain drummed against the windows, filling the silence between us. "Why now?" I finally asked. "Why do you suddenly want to spend time with me after 2 years of barely being home?" He stared into his cup. "I never stopped wanting to spend time with you." "That's not true, Leslie. You chose this. You demanded this arrangement, and now you're upset that I'm actually living my life instead of waiting around for you?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" My voice was calm, steady. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired of pretending, because from where I'm sitting, you got exactly what you wanted. Freedom, no strings, the ability to explore whatever, whoever you wanted. And now you're miserable. His hands started shaking. He set down his cup and pressed his palms flat against the table, and I watched something crumble behind his eyes. "There was someone," he whispered. The words hung in the air like smoke. "What?" "2 years ago, at work. Her name was Rebecca." He couldn't look at me. "She was new to the office. Younger. She was. Exciting." We'd talk during lunch breaks, and Lillian, I felt alive for the first time in years, like I was 25 again. I felt ice spreading through my chest, but I kept my face neutral. "Go on." "I never cheated. I swear I never touched her before we opened the marriage. But I wanted to. That's why His voice cracked. "That's why I asked for the open marriage. I thought if we had an arrangement, I could pursue her without losing you, without it being betrayal. So the open marriage was never about us." My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. "It was permission. Permission to chase someone you were already emotionally invested in." He nodded, tears streaming down his face now. I thought, I thought you'd say no. Part of me hoped you would, but then you agreed, and I thought maybe it could work. Maybe we could both be happy." "And Rebecca?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "She wasn't interested. She was just being friendly. When I finally asked her out, she looked at me like I was pathetic, a married man old enough to be her father." He laughed bitterly. "After that, I tried with other people, but nobody wanted what I was offering. They wanted real relationships, commitment, things I'd already promised to someone else." "To me," I said quietly. "Things you'd promised to me." "I never thought you'd actually go out," he admitted, the words tumbling out now. "I thought you'd stay home, that you'd be here when I needed you." "I didn't think you'd," he gestured helplessly. "You were always so dependent on me, so unsure of yourself. You thought I'd wait around like a faithful dog while you played out your midlife crisis." The silence that followed was deafening. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. I walked to the window and watched rain slide down the glass, distorting the streetlights outside into blurred halos. "I think the day you gave me that ultimatum," I whispered, "my love for you died." We didn't move for a long time after those words left my mouth. Leslie stayed at the table, head in his hands. I stayed at the window, watching the rain. The house felt different, somehow lighter, like a weight I'd been carrying had finally been set down. "Can we talk?" His voice was hoarse. "Really talk? Not like this, not with you over there and me over here." I turned to face him. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, his face drawn and pale. I walked back to the table and sat down, and we began the conversation we should have had 2 years ago. "Do you love me?" he asked, his eyes searching mine desperately. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. "Not the way I used to." He flinched like I'd struck him. "What does that mean?" "It means I care about you. I don't hate you. I probably never could." I folded my hands on the table, surprised by my own steadiness. "But that feeling, the one where my heart would race when you came home, where I'd count the hours until I could see you again, where your happiness mattered more than my own, that's gone, Leslie. It's been gone for a long time." "When?" The word came out broken. "When did it die?" "I don't know if there was one moment. Maybe it was gradual death by 1,000 small abandonments." I paused, remembering. "Or maybe it was that first night you came home at 3 a.m., smelling like someone else's perfume, and went straight to sleep like nothing had changed. I lay awake next to you feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life, and something inside me just closed." Tears were streaming down his face now. "I'm sorry. God, Lillian, I'm so sorry. I was selfish and stupid and scared." "Scared of what?" "Of getting old. Of being boring. Of looking in the mirror and seeing my father 55 years old, tied to the same job, the same routine, the same life for decades." His hands trembled as he wiped his eyes. I panicked. I thought if I didn't do something dramatic, I'd wake up at 70 and realize I'd never really lived. "So you decided to blow up our marriage instead." "I didn't think it would blow up." His voice rose, desperate. "I thought we were solid. I thought we could handle it." I thought. He trailed off, shaking his head. "I thought you needed me more than you actually did." The honesty of that statement hung between us. "You're right," I said quietly. "I did need you. I needed you to be my partner, my friend, my safe place. Instead, you made me feel optional, replaceable. Like I was just there until something better came along. That was never true. Wasn't it?" I met his eyes. "You literally asked for permission to look for something better, Leslie. What else was I supposed to think?" He broke then. Really broke. Great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. "I ruined everything, the best thing in my life, and I destroyed it because I was too stupid and insecure to appreciate what I had. I reached across the table and took his hand not out of love, but out of shared grief, because I was crying too now, tears sliding silently down my face, not because I wanted him back, not because I thought we could fix this. I was crying for the marriage we used to have, for the couple who'd held hands on walks and made pancakes on Sundays and believed they'd grow old together, for 17 years of memories that now felt tainted by the knowledge that he'd been pulling away long before he asked for an open marriage. We sat there for hours, holding hands across the table, crying for what we'd lost and what we'd never get back. And when the tears finally stopped, when the rain had slowed to a drizzle and the house had grown dark around us, we both knew the marriage was over. The decision, when it finally came, was surprisingly undramatic. We'd spent the night talking in circles, apologizing, explaining, remembering, regretting. Around 2 a.m., exhausted and emptied out, Leslie looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and said, "We can't come back from this, can we?" "No," I said softly. "I don't think we can." He nodded slowly, accepting what we'd both been avoiding. "I'll call a lawyer tomorrow. We can do this amicably. Fair division, no fighting. You deserve that much." "We both do." He rubbed his face, looking suddenly older than his 55 years. "You can stay here as long as you need, until everything's finalized. I can sleep in the guest room." "We don't have to rush." "I can't stay here, Leslie." He looked up, surprised. "Where will you go?" "Katie offered me her spare room a few weeks ago." I hadn't told him that. Hadn't told him that my friends had been preparing for this inevitability, creating safety nets I might need. I think I need to leave sooner rather than later." "How soon?" "This weekend." The pain on his face was real, and part of me ached for him. But a larger part of me knew that staying would be like holding onto a corpse, pretending it was still breathing. I started packing the next morning. 17 years of marriage fits into surprisingly few boxes when you're only taking what's truly yours. Clothes, books, a few pieces of art I'd collected over the years. The coffee maker we'd gotten as a wedding gift, I left it. The photos on the walls, I left most of them, taking only a handful where I was alone or with friends and family. Leslie hovered in doorways, watching me pack, occasionally asking if I wanted to take this or that. "The couch? No, you keep it. The kitchen table? It's yours. The set of dishes from your mother? Please, take them." Everything felt both heavy and weightless. Each item I wrapped in newspaper was a memory I was choosing to leave behind or carry forward. The sweater he'd worn on our first date left in his closet. The journal where I'd written during those early lonely months, packed carefully in my box of books. When I taped up the last box, I sat on the edge of our bed, his bed now, and let myself remember. The good years, before the distance crept in. How he'd made me laugh until I cried. How safe I'd felt in his arms. The road trips where we'd sing badly to the radio. The quiet mornings reading the newspaper together. Those memories were real, even if they couldn't sustain us. But I also remembered the bad. How small I'd made myself to avoid conflict. How I'd ignored my own needs to prioritize his comfort. The loneliness I'd felt even before the open marriage, sitting next to him on the couch while he scrolled through his phone, miles away despite being inches apart. The fear, God, the fear I'd lived with for so long. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being abandoned. Fear of discovering that without him, I was nothing. And the mistakes. His, yes, but mine too. Staying silent when I should have spoken up. Agreeing to things that violated my boundaries. Losing myself so gradually I didn't notice until I'd nearly disappeared. Katie picked me up Saturday afternoon. Leslie helped carry boxes to her car, and we stood in the driveway one last time, two people who'd shared nearly 2 decades and now had nothing left to say to each other. "Take care of yourself," he said. "You too." As Katie drove away, I watched our house, his house, shrink in the side mirror. I wasn't crying. I wasn't celebrating. I didn't win. I didn't lose. I simply learned. 6 months after moving into Katie's spare room, I signed the lease on my own apartment. It was small, a one-bedroom with tall windows that let in morning light, and a tiny balcony just big enough for a couple of chairs and some potted plants. The first night I slept there, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The quiet kind that settles into your bones when you stop fighting battles you can't win. Life became simpler in ways I hadn't expected. I woke up when I wanted, ate what I felt like eating, decorated the walls with art that made me smile, not pieces chosen by committee. No one's schedule to coordinate with, no one's mood to manage. Just me, figuring out who I was when I wasn't defined by someone else's needs. I started gardening again, something I'd loved years ago but had abandoned somewhere along the way. My balcony became a small jungle of herbs and flowers. I'd sit out there in the evenings with tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that felt like promises. Painting came back too. I'd painted in college, but life had gotten busy, and brushes had gathered dust in closets. Now I set up an easel by the window and spent Saturday mornings covering canvases with color, not caring if they were good, just needing to create something that was entirely mine. I started volunteering at the library where I worked, running a book club for teenagers. Their energy, their questions, their unfiltered honesty reminded me what it felt like to be becoming rather than being stuck. The open marriage hadn't destroyed me. That's what I finally understood. It had stripped away everything I'd built my identity on being a wife, being needed, being half of a unit, and forced me to discover who I was underneath. Turned out I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for, more resilient, more capable of building a life from scratch. I heard about Leslie through mutual friends. He was in therapy, they said, taking time to work on himself. He'd started hiking, joined a men's support group, was apparently reading a lot. I was glad. Not because I wanted him back, but because I genuinely hoped he'd find whatever he'd been searching for when he'd blown up our marriage. We ran into each other once, at a grocery store. It was awkward for about 30 seconds, then surprisingly easy. We talked about safe things, his new hiking boots, my balcony garden, the weather. We weren't enemies. We weren't friends. We were just two people who'd once loved each other and had grown in different directions. "You look good," he said before we parted. "Peaceful." "I am," I said, and I meant it. As I drove home that day, windows down, music playing, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the loneliness, the slow rebuilding of a self I'd forgotten existed. He'd wanted freedom. In the end, we both found it, just not together. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss stories about resilience, growth, and finding yourself again. Your support means everything. Thank you for listening.